Hi everyone, this is Wolf Branch Homestead. We've made a few videos here recently talking about how we are getting ready to start tanning deer hides this year that we pick up that are normally discarded after hunts. And we wanted to talk a little bit about what it looks like getting involved in the tanning process. And we're going to look specifically at how we're handling our deer and talk a little bit more about that. One of the first considerations when it comes to tanning, I would say, would be kind of a simple 3-letter system. Money, space, time. The investments that you're going to have to make. You'll initially have to purchase supplies, so that's the money aspect. What kind of chemicals are you going to use for tanning? A lot of people right now, it would not be wise to try brain tanning. Some people will substitute for something like cattle or pig brains, but I would not brain tan with a cervid brain right now because of chronic wasting disease. So if you're going to tan in a different method, consider what you're going to need to invest in. Also consider what kind of equipment you're going to need. Your fleshing knives, your skinning knives, other different equipment like your tail zipper, tail stripper. If you're going to have to skin an animal yourself, if it's one that you're actually harvesting and you're going to be skinning, different equipment for that and how you're going to process your meat. If it's something where you're already getting a hide that's off of an animal, you will still probably need a skinning knife to trim off different edges, blemishes on the hide, things like that. You'll also need your equipment for tanning. So consider what kind of bin you're going to let them soak in the solution in if you're using something chemically and you're not putting a brain tan paste on there. So if you're doing a chemical tan, consider the equipment you'll need for putting those hides in there. You don't want to let them soak in any kind of bin made of metal. Your metal will rust. So you have to use a really durable plastic, like a plastic storage tote or a large plastic trash bin. Be careful when you buy these, because if you buy cheap, it's very likely to crack. And we've learned that from purchasing the big trash cans in the past. And we had one where the wheels on it rusted and it cracked through. And even though these were on the outside, still the way it was fastened to the bottom of the barrel, it rusted. So we invested in a different type of trash can for this year, and it's holding up pretty well. It's very sturdy. Again, don't use metal because it will rust. Consider also what you'll need for afterwards. How are you going to handle the hide once you get it in the solution? And even how you're handling it when you're flushing it. Your gloves, apron, boots, clothes that you don't mind getting dirty, possibly ruined if you get a lot on them. Consider eye protection. The smell can be overwhelming too, so you might want to make sure you have a mask, something like that, to try to help cut back on the odor. Be very careful when you're handling any chemicals that you're using. Now, once you get it in that solution, you're going to have to get in there and make sure that you check that hide multiple times a day to make sure it's really tanning correctly. So how are you going to handle it once in the solution? Some very thick rubber gloves to work with. They come up preferably to your elbow. Once you get it out of the solution, you're going to have to rinse that off, and you'll have to find a space to wring the hide to get all that excess water out of there before you let it dry. How are you going to dry your hide? As it starts to dry, it's also going to be time to stretch that hide. How are you going to stretch it? Well, for us, I've got a small pry bar that I use, and I actually have a little pad that I put down on the floor on top of that deer hide, and I use that pressure to push away from me and help break the hide. And there's other different ways for softening the hide once you get that stretched out. So consider what kind of tools you'll use for softening the hide. I like to use different grit sandpaper to go over there and get it really smooth. Consider how you'll preserve it after that. What will you use to smoke the hide? That's what really sets that tanning and solidifies it. So you're looking at money invested into your tools, the things you're going to need. Well, space is another important factor. How are you going to transport the hides once you get them? Where are you going to set up your flushing beam at? And how are you going to get them fleshed out? Where are you going to do that at? You need to make sure that you have an area that doesn't have access for a lot of flies, yellow jackets, domestic pets, other wild critters. You want to make sure that your space is set up where children can't get to that, and again, other animals. Once you get that flushing part done, and you get everything ready to be tanned, where are you going to store that tanning solution at that's out of the way where nothing can access it? It's good to have a trash bin or a tote with a lid on it to help prevent that, and put it in an area, again, that nobody can access that, where you can't have children or animals getting to the hides that are tanning. Space also includes when you get them out and you need to wring them, where are you going to wring the hides at? When you get that part done, where and how are you going to stretch them? And where are you going to smoke them? Think about these things before you get into your tanning process. It really helps to avoid a lot of headache when you're struggling to find these areas. Maybe you've already committed to tanning one and you've got it in and you're concerned about what you're going to do with it now. It's good to consider these things. Also consider time. Time is a very important factor. With something like a white-tailed deer hide, I've had experience with that over the years, and now it's typically still around 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how bad they are, how much is on them, especially for a larger one, like a very large buck. Consider the time that you're going to have to spend getting those hides, preparing them, flushing them. For the whitetail, in the method that I'm tanning it, I've got in the solution for a week, and I'm going multiple times a day to check that hide and turn it and make sure that they are getting the tanning solution in every part of the hide. So you have to factor in your time, not only for getting it and flushing it, but also checking it, making sure that hide is okay. Listening to the woodpeckers fly overhead. They're enjoying this nice warm day. Now also for time is when you get it out of the solution. You're getting it all rinsed off. You're going to wring that hide, stretching it, smoking it, different things like that. There's a lot of time invested in this. So make sure that you have time to commit to a project like that. A deer might be too much for a beginner. Start small with something like a rabbit. If you can, a good practice hide would be something like a domestic farm-raised rabbit. A wild rabbit has a very thin hide. The cottontails especially, they have a very thin hide that when you go to try to flesh, I've learned in the past, is very easy to tear. Now, I haven't tanned anything else like that in a long time. The only thing we pick up now is the deer, because we can go to different places that get these already harvested deer. They're processing the meat, and the individuals are not able to keep the hide to do anything with it. They're not getting a mount done, so the hides are just going to go to waste. So finding somebody that's hunted is a good way to source your hides. And if you feel like you might be overwhelmed with doing a full deer, you can always cut that. Cut it into about a quarter of the size and try just that quarter piece. Now, the white area of the white-tailed deer on the belly is very thin, so be careful. And that's usually going to be the outside part that they've cut through when they go to gut the deer. So the white fur area is going to be very easy to have hair slip, and also it's going to be thin. You also want to try, if you're a beginner, to avoid that section around the neck, because that can be very, very thick and kind of hard to work with. So ideally, if you're going to cut a segment to try to work with, get that part that's on the back, the middle section of the back. That's a good place to start. Again, time also involves doing research and learning more about the process, studying different methods, taking notes to see what works for you and what doesn't, and how you can better alter that in the future. There's a lot of things to consider, again, with these three types of investments: your money, space, and time. And hopefully this will help somebody that's interested in possibly learning about that process of tanning and trying it for themselves, to give you some considerations to think about before you try to jump headfirst into it. Again, if you're doing something smaller, you're going to be on a smaller scale, not like something like we have with the deer. We have a lot of different things for that, a lot of larger things that we're using, like our fleshing beam. It's a big full-size one. It's not something smaller. It's not a tabletop one. We have all of our chemicals that we use for tanning. We have large batches of those. We buy in bulk because we're going to use so much of that. And with us doing this, I consider my time of how long it's going to be. I take notes on about how long it takes to get through everything, and I know when I need to dedicate time to working on them. And I factor when I have free time available into when I go and pick up hides. And after I get the other ones finished, when I'm going to go through the next steps of that. And also space. We have all of our space set up for where we do this, where it's out of the way of other projects in our shop down there. And I have my station set up for where I wring them at, where I get them dried and stretched, things like that, and our little gazebo where I do the smoking part at. So we have all of these things sorted and figured out. And I say all this in trying to help others learn about it, because I went through all these experiences to start with where I kind of jumped into it. I knew a little bit. I didn't know a lot. I got very quickly overwhelmed. I hadn't tanned too terribly much, and I went and picked up a load of deer hides, and it was just overwhelming. I wasn't prepared for the smell and the messiness, the time it took to get through all of that, the equipment. Very ill prepared when I first started. So I'm hoping in saying this that maybe it will help someone else that's interested in learning about tanning. Again, for what we do in our tanning, it's not anything that we've harvested ourselves. I know many of you that have been on the channel for a while are probably kind of sick of hearing the explanation about why we do this. But for any of our new followers, we want to make sure that we say this. We've got a plane going overhead, so if you hear that in the background, I apologize. But we go and pick up these hides that are just going to get tossed and wasted anyways. So it's not a deer that we've went and hunted ourselves. And we get those hides and take it entirely through the process by hand. As much as I would love to have fancy tannery equipment, that's not what we're set up to have. Oh yeah, that's a big military plane that looks like a C-130 going over. Can't quite tell. Every so often they'll pass over, sometimes in a group of 3. But we take everything through the process by hand. All the fleshing, turning the hides in the solution, and getting all of the stretching done, the smoking. So we put good time and effort into this for something that is a really neat experience at the end. When we can take these hides that were just normally going to be discarded, and we can find them a new home after putting all of that work into it, or even make something ourselves. For the simplest thing to do with them, they're very nice little rugs. We had one in the cabin for a while, and they're very soft and very neat to have. And some people will put them in their little hunting cabins. They'll put them in there with mounts. They'll add them to mounts. They'll make crafts with them. You can get some of the thinner areas and possibly make a little bag out of it, or you can roll one up and make yourself a nice little arrow quiver. There's different things that you can do with them. There's a whole lot of ideas. We've only touched on a few of them. So it's a very rewarding process at the end, especially if you want to make something with it yourself. And we hope that talking a little bit about our experiences will benefit you. And again, this has just been something we've done for a few years now. I would say it's been maybe 8 years we've been doing this. And I've very much enjoyed it because it is rewarding. But again, like we've talked about in the past, everybody has different methods, different tips and tricks, so don't just take our word for it. Do some more homework on it. Pick up some good books. Look at more videos. Maybe see if there's any classes nearby in person. Again, lots of different ways to go about it. Lots of different ways to learn. Some people can watch a video and pick up fast. Some people can read and really go from there, and some people have to learn hands-on. So understanding what type of learner you are will also help. But that's all for this video. Again, mainly touching on the investment portion before you get started tanning. What money you'll need to spend for your equipment, what space you'll need to go throughout the process, and the time commitment that you'll need as well. We hope you have a wonderful day. We thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video. Have a wonderful day and take care.